Hello and welcome back to Disney Journey. I'm retired Imagineer Jim Shull, and as always, we're going to go on a trip. This one, however, is a little different because I'm going to be going to Cambridge, Massachusetts, and you're coming along with me. Because the purpose of this show, well, Disney Dish is a long-standing, nearly 500 episode long podcast specifically dealing with Disney parks and resorts. And it's hosted by Jim Hill and Testa. And they were invited to deliver a live show before the students in MIT in the Media Lab. And so that's where we're going to be going on this episode of Disney Journey. There's a saying that you can't get there from here, but you can get to Boston from Los Angeles. It just takes an airplane. Not to mention an Uber, whose driver, well, they knew their way around Boston. So in just a few short minutes, I found myself standing on the campus of MIT. I'm a tourist. Don't judge me. MIT is a big campus with many, many buildings. But my goal that day was to find out where Disney Dish was going to be broadcasting from. So thankfully, these breadcrumbs led me to the room. And behind that door, I found Jim Hill and Len Testa sitting before their mics, about to record Disney Dish live at MIT.
Jim Hill is an entertainment writer who specialized in covering the Walt Disney Company for nearly 40 years. Over that time, he's interviewed hundreds of actors, animators, and Imagineers, many of whom have shared behind-the-scenes stories with him about how the Mouse House really works. And of course, I think many so, yeah. Jim's co-host Len Testa is the co-author of The Unofficial Guide to Walt Disney World, The Unofficial Guide to Disneyland, The Unofficial Guide to British Theme Parks. He's also a contributor to The Unofficial Guide to Las Vegas. They feel very official to me in a lot of ways. It's the knowledge we need. Len's responsible for these things called touring plans, which I love, that were the result of his graduate thesis, and he's the lead researcher for touringplans.com and book content. And I think of both of them as like amazing historians and storytellers. So I think we're in for a fun evening, and I will turn it over to them.
England and UK and France into World Circus Lagoon because his friends promised to pay him $6,000, which almost covers his legal fees. also, so I was talking to a bunch of cast members after this, and they were like, "Does he know what's in that water?"
All right. Now mind you, this is not the first time that a guest has decided to turn a fountain at a Disney theme park into their own personal wading pool. Case in point, the decorative reflecting pool out in front of Countdown to Extinction. When Disney's Animal Kingdom first opened in April of 1998, kids just couldn't help themselves, especially on those hot summer days in Florida.
And where this gets interesting is that when Countdown to Extinction was retooled in the spring of 2000, ahead of the release of Dinosaur the movie, the Imagineers actually used this same opportunity to rework the fountain in front of this attraction, not only changing out the dinosaur statue.
Oh yes, okay, the dinosaur you see now in the fountain, this is Eldar.
This is actually someone dipping their kid in the fountain. But Jim, do you know who that is?
Jim, please tell me that it's not Joe Rogan.
It's Joe Rogan!
This is the man who designs the nice thing! How come the man who designs the nice thing would do that?
I didn't tell Jim I had this.
Well, it's efficient off the rails. Okay. All right, moving on.
Do I have? Sorry, next.
Okay, but all right. So, and realistically, okay. So, what they did, in fact, Mr. Shull was explaining about this. They redid the fountain out in front and threw in Aldera, the dinosaur who starred in the 2000 Walt Disney Animation Studios thing, but to try to prevent the kids from going into the fountains, they retooled the outside of it and put up planters, is that correct, around the edge of the fountains to try to slow down the kids, which clearly didn't slow down Joe Rogan. All right, so, all right, anyway.
All right, here we go. So, let's see. All right. So people have been swimming in things they shouldn't in Disney parks since the early 1960s. But Jim, there are times when you're allowed to swim in water in Disney parks, right?
Well, if you were a mermaid that got hired for the job, yes. This quartet of young ladies were hired in the late 50s, early 60s, and what they did is they would put them out there during the summer months, and they would wave to the tourists that went by. And now, where this gets interesting is Disneyland is just up the road from Camp Pendleton.
The marine base?
The marine base, and
The Marines are amphibious, aren't they?
Well, they are. And that was the thing. They would regularly be, when the young ladies were out on the rock in the middle of the submarine lagoon, there would invariably be a Marine or two on the weekend that would slip over the side of the fence and swim out and try to get their number. And then, by the time they swim back to shore, security would be waiting for them, and it's like, okay, come with us, come to the exit. And again, it was a different time, but it was like, don't come back for a couple of weeks. Again, you're serving the country, we appreciate it. Don't come back for a few weeks.
But there were some kids that were definitely allowed to play in the parks, right?
Well, yeah, Walt's grandchildren. In fact, I got this story from Diane Disney Miller herself. And basically the way she told the story is that Walt, in the very early 1960s, had invited her, and they only had the 3 children at that point. I mean, let's see, what do we got the names here?
Christopher, Joanna, and Jennifer.
There we go. Okay, and they're staying the weekend at Disneyland in Walt's apartment over the firehouse, and it's a teeny tiny space. I don't know if any of you have done the tour. That's tiny, but it's 4 adults and 4 kids in this very small space for an entire weekend. And on Sunday morning, before everybody goes home, Diane gets up and immediately knows she's in trouble because she can't hear her children.
It's too quiet. Yeah,
too quiet.
Everyone who has kids knows there's good quiet and there's bad quiet.
It's like, okay, where did they go? Are they loose in the park? It's like, oh no, it's so much worse. They have gone down the back steps of the firehouse and walked straight into the forest surrounding the jungle cruise, where they are now leaping out, as the boats go by. And,
I would love to have been a Jungle Cruise skipper when that happened.
Well,
you're right, you can see pygmies and
the albino pygmies.
Let's keep going. Yeah.
So anyway, what ends up happening though is that the problem is Walt thinks this is hilarious. And so, but more to the point, Walt did this himself. Because Walt built the place, and more to the point, he had the keys to everything. And so, and when you factored in that he had this polo injury, which made it difficult for him to sleep, so he would go to the parks on the weekends. He would, go to bed in the upstairs in the over the firehouse, and eventually can't sleep, grab the keys, and go out and bother the guys on third shift. Like, hi, what are you doing? And the part of the story that I love is that they had just opened the sun-kissed citrus house at Disneyland. And the gimmick of this was you went into this store, and what they did is they had actually, they would get oranges from the really for real orange groves that still surrounded Disneyland at that time. And you could go in and you could watch the cast member feed them into the machine whole, and then this wonderful fresh oranges would come out of the machine. And so, and Walt was fascinated.
I actually have a picture of Walt holding a glass of
orange
juice.
Okay, all right. He loved fresh orange juice. He never figured out how to use the machine. All right, so picture this: you work at the sun-kissed house And it's, you know, and you turn the key in the morning, you come, and there's like 30 half squished oranges behind the counter, all right? And
three guys from janitorial, like, looking at you like, please God, let me out of here. Like, save me! Save me!
well, that's the other thing. I mean, picture this, you know, Walt handing you the orange juice that he's personally made. It's like, all right, ignore the seeds and the chunk of the skin there, and whatever else that other thing is. I think that's a fingernail bite. Sorry. Nothing like fresh squeeze.
But you can't say no to Walt.
No, you can't. He's the boss.
Yeah, all right. So, this is exactly how the show goes. Anyway, Walt's the boss. You come to work, you find a bunch of half-squeezed oranges piled up behind the counter. You grumble, you throw them away, you clean it behind the counter, and then you move on with your day.
And speaking of fruit, it's now time to talk about those apples that the old crone,
The Wicked Queen in disguise?
there we go, same difference. Okay, the old crone would hold up and seemingly offer to guests as they repeats over and over again, "Have apples, dearie!"
I mean, it's practically an invitation, Jimmy.
Yes. And
I seem to think that historically, when someone offers you an apple and you take it, it never goes well. I seem to remember a couple of stories about this.
I think you are correct.
Okay, all right, good.
Well, anyway, that annual pass holders in California decided to take the old crone up on her offer.
And they took the apple?
Well, and again, just to show back me up here, there is a design principle that the Imagineers employ whenever they're putting together a new attraction for the park, called the envelope of protection. Is that the right phrase?
The reach envelope.
The reach envelope. There we go.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Which calculates what the maximum human arm reaches for guests when seated inside of a ride vehicle, and then they deliberately place all the props and the set pieces in that ride 6 inches further out from that point.
All right, that seems like a smart idea, but that wasn't the case when they originally did Snow White Scary Adventure, right, or whatever it's called.
Well, all right. Snow White was one of the original Dark Runners, and you know, Walt's first set of Imagineers. You know, when they were designing his family fun
Yeah.
park. You know,
How was it behave? What could possibly go wrong?
yeah, and again, you know, the whole notion of having to create, you know, the you know, understanding what the human reach is, you know, just they didn't honestly take that into account. And so, as the 1950s gave way to the 60s, then the 70s, and the 80s, kids got bigger and taller.
It was all that damn orange juice they were drinking.
There we go. And what the kids learned at that time is they stood up in their seat while they were traveling through Snow White.
Okay, this is where we have to say, do not try this at home or in a park, okay? Don't do it. All right.
All right. So what ends up happening is,
You could apparently grab the apple.
well, yes, you could. In fact, my friend Robert Bish, and I'm pretty sure that the statute of limitations is out. Because, you know, Robert...
This is one of those things where we'll have to check this in post.
Yeah, there we go. But Robert passed away a few years ago, and Robert, he gifted me one day, and I want you to take a look at that.
There's actually glue on the bottle.
Yes, well, again, with in the witch's hand, more to the
Wow.
point, it's still got the black light paint on it, because again, this is a black light paint attraction, but Robert had an amazing collection. In fact, when he gifted this to me, it was like, you know, it's like, no, I can't take this, Robert. And he said, no, I've got 35. and he also had from Alice in Wonderland the scepter, heart-shaped scepter that the king had.
Who is the completest here? Don't do this.
All right. But what ended up happening was that Robert's career as a requisitioner of Disney props.
Is his career in apple in fruit harvesting?
Well, what ended up happening is they opened the Pinocchio's Daring Journey run.
Oh, yeah.
And there is a scene in that where you pass through Geppetto's workshop, and you have all of these wonderful, you know, little wooden toy, you know,
Music boxes.
Music boxes. And Robert lusted after one
in
of the dishes.
his heart. Yeah.
And what he ended up doing was that, he convinced my friend Vito to basically, Robert leaned out of the cart as far as he could go. Vito hung on to the back of his pants, and it allowed him to reach out and grab the music box, which he held on to, not realizing it had been glued.
So he's holding on, and the vehicle's still moving.
And the vehicle's still moving, and he pulls over the entire shelf onto the right track. All right.
I think for legal reasons, that's as far as we should go with this.
There we go. All right.
So okay,
That's
so
right.
we're talking about the 1980s. Guests begin misbehaving in earnest, and how do the Imagineers combat that?
Well, all right. First and foremost, you began to see a lot of security cameras put into attractions, and but then this meant that you had to have one poor employee in a room filled with black and white screens, like 30 different cameras of various points throughout the ride, and what's a polite way of saying this in front of families? They saw a lot of interesting behavior.
Yeah.
In fact, in fact, a lot of adults and teenagers took it upon themselves to see how much fun they could have in 4.5 minutes on an attraction.
It sounds like a new reality TV show.
There we go. But yeah, the other thing, they began putting into attractions intrusion mats, right?
Oh yeah, because you saw that video of the guys walking around the horizon sets, right?
Yes.
Which, I mean, it's just we all wanted to do it, but only a couple of people actually did it. And that's when they started installing special security for that, right?
Well, what was interesting is they began over time to determine, like, for example, in rides like It's a Small World and Pirates, there were actually evacuation points. I mean, literally places in rides where if it breaks down, that's where they take the guests off of it. But there were also, to be honest, places where it would be relatively easy for a guest to step out.
Right.
And so they began to lay down these mats in this area so that when somebody stepped out, there was literally a light, a signal that would be back,
Intrusion mats. Yeah.
Intrusion.
And you can see one on the Seas with Nemo and Friends, and I've highlighted it here in orange, but the floor is a little bit of a different color in a rectangle pattern. That's an intrusion mat. And the other interesting thing about this is when you and I and Jim Shull were in Universal Hollywood in March, we went on The Secret Life of Pets, which is a slow-moving ride like Peter Pan's Flight. We are on the ground, and you're on a ride vehicle that moves at like 2 miles an hour, and you're going through the sets that explains the story. The interesting thing was there's a team member for Universal who will crank down the lap bar so far into your stomach that you were like, what? You were thinking to yourself, is this thing going upside down? I don't know. And apparently what it is they cram it down so far, not because it's a fast ride or it goes upside down, it's so you don't get out and take selfies with the animatronics and then jump back in the ride.
That is the age we live in.
Yeah, it's amazing.
But at the same time, where this gets fascinating is that even attractions that you build and figure, well, there's no way they're going to climb on this, and which I guess brings us now to what is it? Casey Jr.'s Splash and Soak? Is that?
Runaway Railway is the next thing.
Okay. Well, I mean, and again, this is a story from Mr. Shull. That what's fascinating culturally is, for example, if you go to Tokyo Disneyland, there are places and attractions where props are easily within guest reach, are beautiful, elaborate, and never get touched because
you're not supposed to.
No, that's exactly. Whereas if we look at, we were in Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway, the California version. It hadn't even really officially opened at that point.
No, we were there, I think, the day before it officially opened.
Okay.
Yeah.
And for example, here.
Has anyone seen this? It's a beautiful queue.
Yeah.
Really, really well done.
No, they do this amazing version of summing up, every part of, of Mickey's career. And initially it was, hugely interactive. I mean, for example, they had, when you arrived to the Steamboat Willie moment in the attraction, they actually had the wheel, and you could spin the wheel.
Yeah, really nice stuff.
But
even then, I mean, we were there the day before it opened, and some of these props were already showing signs of.
No, it just seems to be I wonder if that thing will come off. Oh, it did.
We've talked about the story about when Galaxy's Edge opened with the sporks, right? Mm-hmm. You guys heard this? Has anyone not heard it? Okay, all right, I'll take 2 seconds to do it. Okay, for the people who haven't seen it. When Galaxy's Edge first opened, the day it opened in Disneyland, I was there with Guy Salvo, who works for me, and we had ridden Millennium Falcon, and then went to get something to eat at Docking Bay 7. And on opening day, there were these really exquisite metal sporks in a sort of like olive green that were there. So Guy and I walked through Docking Bay 7, and we're the only two guests there. It's all Disney execs eating breakfast. And so we get our food, we go over to the little station where you pick up your condiments and napkins and everything, and they had the sporks there. And as soon as I picked one up and realized it was metal, I shouted over to Guy and said, Guy, come get a picture of this because everyone's gonna steal them by tonight. And as soon as I said the word steal, the Disney execs who were eating their breakfast went like this. And then so we go sit down, and just as casually as you could do it, one of the execs, gets their napkin, puts like this, goes up, and starts counting all of the sporks. Okay, we got 48, and these guys have 2, right? So by the end of the day, half of the sporks were gone. The next day, Disney cast members were stationed at the exit of the restaurant, and they said, "Oh, I see that you had 2 meals. I'll take your 2 sporks right now." And you would put dirty sporks in their hand. And then by Monday they were all gone, and they were $75 on eBay. Yeah. All right.
Yeah, and it just give one further Galaxy's Edge story on the pile. What is it? The Rise of the Resistance ride. And again, just to give you some idea of the American take on things, there. You know how you come on the main deck and there that sea of stormtroopers, and then but they gave you that.
Wait, you can steal a stormtrooper?
This reminds me of the story about.
This would be Exhibit A. You are all unindicted co-conspirators. Congratulations! Wow! How about that?
What's weird is if you talk with people at Disney security, it's like, what didn't they try to steal?
Oh, yeah.
In fact, one security veteran at Disneyland, literally, it's like, it's the end of the night, and and a family's heading out the door with their giant stroller, with clearly a toddler, whose name is Bronco Nagurski. I mean, there's a big blanket over something, and the security guy
could be sleeping.
Yeah, that's like, hold. Just can we make sure your kid's okay?
Yeah.
And they lift up the blanket, and it's Dopey. I mean, literally from the Snow White Scary Adventure.
We bought it, I swear.
But they had made it. Literally, they had made it to the stamp your hand position. They
so
were
close.
So close. And it's just like, first of all, you came into the unload station. You left with 2 people. You came back with 3.
Someone in security's like, do I stop them, or does my shift end in 6 minutes?
No, they had managed to make it from Fantasyland all the way to the exit, and only then got
So
stopped.
close. This is like Shawshank Redemption 2. But I mean, this is the thing that Jim Shull tells us all the time, right? That you design stuff in the parks, and then you see how people use it, right?
And speaking of that brings us now to Casey Jr. What is it? The
Splash and Soak Station.
Yeah. And again, think about it. It's this lovely water play area that's been set up in the storybook circus section of New Fantasyland.
Right, this is like 2012-ish. This is New Fantasyland.
Yeah, and initially, everybody loves it. Just sort of. And
You run around, you splash in the water. What could possibly go wrong?
Well, what could go wrong is the kids began to actually climb on the train, which
wet children with small hands climbing on the train.
And more to the point, lots of hard plastic with sharp angles. And what I love about this is Disney's solution to it wasn't, well, we got to pull it. It's like, oh no, we'll build a cage around it, and that will keep the kids out. So it's Casey Jr. Incarcerated for a crime. Did not do that. Committed. So.
It is a little weird to see the circus train in Go behind bars, but that's what they had to do, right?
Yeah, and to be clear here, when it isn't always a bad thing when guests go where they're not supposed to. I mean, for example, in the early days of the park, when Walt would come down on the weekends, and especially in the town square area and at the hub, he'd watch, when people would run across a lawn. And he would go to his guys in horticulture, and it wasn't a question of, to put up a step, don't step on the grass sign. It's like, we need to put a walkway here. They just told us that's where they want the walkway, and so that's what they wound up doing.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, but we're not talking about things like that now. Let's circle back to the World Showcase. So adult beverages will make people do strange things, right?
They will. And what's especially interesting about this is that the folks in Epcot, after watching the two guys climb into the fountain, they didn't pull a Walt. They didn't go, that's what we need, curbside jacuzzis.
And that reminds me, because we could have had an additional attraction in the Mexico Pavilion, right?
There we go.
So this is a guy, it was 2015, he decided to climb the outside of the pyramid in Mexico, and he stood there. And the funny thing for me was, obviously what he did is super dangerous and you should not do it, but Disney had to convince security guards to climb up that steep thing. And the security guards were like, he'll come down eventually. One way or another, he's coming down. We don't need to go up there, he'll come down.
And the other thing is, think about this, Disney, let's be honest, we started the story with an alcohol-fueled behavior, we're looking at an alcohol-fueled behavior, but it's not like the Walt Disney World Resort is going to back away from
Alcohol sales, no.
No, not at all, not at all.
Oh, by the way, and I want to mention this, have you seen the new, and this isn't part of the script, so I'm going to wing it, have you seen the new Disney guidelines for social media influencers? Just came out this week.
Oh, okay.
Has anyone seen this? Okay. So Disney is sending out text to companies like us that employ social media influencers to cover the parks. And one of the things that they say is Disney now has to approve social media influencers who go into the parks on behalf of companies like touring plans.
Interesting.
But the rules include not showing or talking about alcohol in the parks. And my first question was, okay, so I'm a social media influencer, it's July of 2024. I'm gonna open up my Instagram reel with, welcome to Epcot's Food and Moon Festival. Like, you can't talk about alcohol or show alcohol at the Food and Moon Festival. So I was like, has anyone actually read this before do they know that they sell alcohol? Like, how do you talk about wine pairings? Yeah, anyway.
Okay. By the way, to be fair here, I have my own alcohol related.
Not there yet. I have one more thing I want to do. Okay. Oh yes. Yeah. So just to show you how different American theme parks are in terms of play from U.S. theme parks. I was in Europe this summer. I went to Tivoli Gardens in Copenhagen, which is wonderful. I loved it. But they had a game here. Jim Shull, I want you to watch this video and tell me what it would take for the Disney lawyers to approve this kind of game in a Disney theme park. Let's see if I can make this happen. It's an actual bow and arrow that you give to get. Wait, it gets better. And this guy's from California, so you can't hear audio, but it's me saying, "You think you could do this in Disneyland?" And the wife is like, "Oh, hell no." But look, he gets an actual arrow, and he doesn't know how to use it. And they give it to him anyway. And then eventually he shoots it. And he hits a target. And I'm like, what would the conversation be with Disney's lawyers? Okay, where you would be like, okay, step one, we give them weapons.
It's the 50th anniversary of the release of Robin Hood.
Oh, is that? Oh, there we go.
Which, by the way, coming out of the Buddy Baker archive, they actually, in the late 70s, they were going to do a Robin Hood dark road. So something like this, once upon a time, Disney might have actually gone to it.
But can you imagine, like, if they did it, like, let's say they did it in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
So it's Food and Wine, right? Or Food and Festival. You've had you've knocked back a couple of vloggers, right? And then someone hands you a bow and arrow. What's going on? Anyway, you were going to tell your story about Club 33.
Yes. Okay. It is it's the summer of 1982. In fact, Fantasmic has just started, at the park, and I have managed to score an invitation to Club 33 out in California.
Okay, and this is, at the time, it's the only place in the park that serves alcohol.
That it does.
Okay.
That it was.
This is what we call foreshadowing.
Okay. So, and for some odd reason, the folks at Club 33 have decided they like us. And, we have several adult beverages during our meal. And now, it's literally, the restaurant is closed. We are the last people in the restaurant. The staff is clearing everything, but they're letting us stay. And this was during the first summer of Fantasmic. They would do 3 shows, and now it's time for the 11:30 show of Fantasmic. And I hear, the overture starts.
I'm going to go see the show. I love the show.
And there's a set of double doors right next to my chair.
And they're on the right-hand side of the picture here.
Okay, so I stand up, I open the double doors, and I step out onto the strictly decorative.
It is not a load-bearing structure.
And I had it together enough to, when it started to move, to step back. So I was like, slam the door quickly and sit down. I don't really need to see that.
The music here is just fine.
There we go.
This is how long ago?
This was 1992, so 41 years ago?
Alright, so I have to assume that by now someone has those doors locked during the Fantasmic performances.
More to the point, I hope somebody made a safety inspection.
Hopefully there's someone in Disneyland management listening to this podcast who can contact someone at Club 33 to make sure it doesn't happen.
Oh, God, yes.
But anyway, Jeff, this is a good point. It's a good point to end our show and say, this is why we can't have nice sex.
There we go.
So, and with that terrifying and possibly lawsuit-related tale, this special Disney edition, recorded live at the Theme Park Play Workshop at MIT, comes to a close. Thanks again to TL Taylor for inviting us to take part in this prestigious event. And as I said earlier, I do hope the Dean was made aware of our appearance at this conference, especially since Mr. Hell seems to have just confessed to multiple felonies. Misdemeanors at best, is what you're trying to say. Anyway, here's something our next on location podcast doesn't come to you from the state Senate. That's going to do it for the show today. You can help support our show and Jim Hill Media by subscribing over at patreon.com/JimHillMedia, where we're posting new, never-seen stuff weekly, including a new Q&A show with Disney Imagineering Jim Shull. We didn't know why you did that, or how you came, and we'll see you on the next show. All right, we have time for a few questions.
Okay. Cool. So is that okay?
Yes, sir.
Thank you again for the info.
Well, that brings this episode of Disney Journey to a close. But keep your bag packed, because we're going to go on another one real soon. Until we do, as always, I invite you to like and subscribe to my channel. Oh, and also hit that little bell notification icon to be notified of my next episode. Until the next time then, it's going to be, as always, goodbye from Lost Canyon.